Is it starting? It looks like it's starting. It looks like it started.
It is now.
Hey, how you doing? Justin here, special guest. My good friend Dave Marks is joining me today. We've been rebuilding the studio and we're going to do some recording tomorrow. And as he was here, it doesn't make any sense to have him upstairs bored when I'm doing a live stream.
He's got be bored as well.
Exactly. So it's likely there's going to be a little bit more banter and some fun stuff going on. But we are going to try and approach the topic of triads because they're super interesting. And I think often confused, people feel like that there's maybe some holy grail that is going to suddenly make their playing blossom. And it can be a useful tool, don't get me wrong, but there's lots of other things that I think can help your musical development in a lead sense anyway, for me. We're going to touch on that in a bit. But the first thing we need to talk about is what is a triad? And it's not the Asian guys with machine guns.
Wow.
It's a different sort.
You went there.
Yeah, I went there. So the idea of a triad, it's a first note, the third note, and the fifth note of a major scale gives us a major triad. And if you lower that third by one semitone, we get a minor triad. Triad's really good place to start. It's a practical application in a rhythm sense. One person playing chords on an acoustic guitar and the other person playing little triads. But what you'll find is taking that one shape that you learn first of all and sliding up and down the neck does get a bit tiresome after a little while, and there's some really good options. Something that many people have heard of but maybe don't fully understand is this term inversion. And an inversion of a triad is just the same notes of a triad but with one of the notes that's not the root note as the lowest note of the chord, of the triad shape. So we tend to call them first inversion, which has the third of the chord in the bass, and second inversion where the fifth of the chord is in the bass. To be honest, I wouldn't really worry about it as long as it's got the triad notes in the key of G, a G, a B, and a D. As long as it's got those three notes and the order of it doesn't really matter. Really, the inversion thing I think comes into play with the sound of the bass note, the harmonic movement, rather than just the particular chord grip. Combination of triads. So let me show you a close-up example of another shape of an inversion of a triad that you could eventually learn to mix the two together. So if we start by looking at the different ways of playing just a G chord, we had the G, B and the D there. If I look for another way of playing a G, B and a D, we could also do it here. So there's the G, there's the B and there's the D. And we could also do it up here where there's the G, B and the D. So this is actually the root position up here. So you can hear it's G, G, still G, maybe play the upper octave and back down. These are all ways of playing a G chord. And you could use any one of those shapes or start to combine them. So really a great exercise would be to start by using each one of them over that same progression. Let's do the same thing, Dave, and I'll do the root position one first. Same idea though. Now I'll use the middle one. So you can use any one of those three triad shapes at any point. The realistic thing that you do would be to mix them all together. So instead of just playing one shape and moving it up and down, you might be doing, let me go to close-up mode so you can see what I'm talking about, but you might play the G chord like that, and instead of going up to a C all the way up here, you might use C there. So you end up with G, C, back to G, and then the closest one, you'd have D there or D there. So you can start to move between any of those different shapes, and the more you do it, the more you start to be able to look at ways of using them to create a melodic idea by focusing on the top note of the triad, or just looking for like something that sounds interesting, something grabs your ear that you might deliberately slide around a lot or deliberately not slide around a lot or somewhere in between. And I think all of those things are valid choices and a great exercise to be doing. Any thoughts?
Yeah, it's one of the things I notice when I play with other guitar players. Your decision of which, as you said, you can do sort of slidey, that kind of thing where you purposefully move up and down the neck. It has a load of energy. It has a load of kind of punkiness to it. It's being aware of which style of music you're playing as to whether if you are playing a punky thing and you're playing, it's wrong. It should be. And similarly, if you're playing something that's a little more sophisticated or a little bit more gentle, those things where the shapes connect together very close by, essentially there you're going da 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 do da. I think loads about the top note, da 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 da. So you can create these little, or even da 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 da. All those sorts of things, when you need to make these decisions, it's not just driven by, like, I can play some shapes. You could even have it where you start a song here. Need to take up the energy. And thinking about that thing, that each time you go higher, it kind of gets brighter in a way, and it has more energy. When you go lower, it feels bigger and more solid. So making those decisions once you learn those triad shapes, that whenever you're playing something with someone, you don't just decide based on the shape or your fingers or anything, that you think about what the music needs, and then you think, okay, I have access to all these different tools, I can just jump around and make them happen.
I think there's, at least for myself, there were stages of that, which I think is worth being aware of. So this is absolutely where you should head to. I think if you try to do that at the initial stages while you're trying to figure them out or get used to the sound, it can get overwhelming because you're trying to think of the melody, you're trying to think of those things. It should 100% be the driver, like the melodic element that you're doing. When I was learning to do it, when I first learned the triad grips and was getting into this idea, I played in a covers band, and we played that song Walking on Sunshine by Katrina and the Waves, which is like 1-4-5-4 for pretty much the whole song. And I started off being a bit grumpy about it, like, oh God, I've got to play this song again, it's the same chords. But once I discovered triads, I'm like, what a great exercise for me to practice all my triad shapes. So I used to literally, anyone who came to see those gigs, you know, was it like pub bands, it wasn't in working men's clubs, I was practicing on stage and just trying to figure out different ways of linking the arpeggios. And as Dave was saying, after a while of doing that, I started to become more aware of, oh, I can get this movement here, or these ones sound better in this place, or you can make those decisions better. But I feel like you've still got to drive through that first part of just literally
just
like
figuring them out,
putting them up and down, playing the same shapes as close as you can together as an exercise.
Yeah.
I
would say some punky or grungy or kind of like Pixies, that era of stuff, they use loads of these kinds of sliding shapes where you can just get yourself, go, okay, I'm going to grab hold of one of the shapes and just play it until it's really, really bedded in. Some of those things, Kurt Cobain again used lots of this kind of slidey stuff around. You could do that just to get used to what the shapes are, because I think with all of these, it's getting to where it feels familiar, to where I'm not thinking triad, I'm just thinking G.
Yes.
Oh, G a little bit higher, oh, G, so on. So maybe trying to find music that you know will use these things in them that you can jam over, and it lets people kind of play with them in a familiar place.
Yep. I always think of Brown Eyed Girl. Like,
yeah, I mean,
it's using that stuff, well, not all of the way through, because he's using some sticks and he uses some single lines as well. But it's beautifully played, actually, as a guitar part. Like, it's
all of Van Morrison's
really,
stuff.
really well done. I
magic.
can't remember the name of the guy now. Can you? The guitar player who played on that. I did know it because I've actually transcribed the whole of that song. I did it on a workshop a few years ago, and I transcribed all of the lead parts for the whole song. And it's just beautifully done, really. So if you're looking for some ideas and different approaches and the way that he uses, sometimes it's a bit busier, sometimes it's a bit more laid back, introducing the idea of just playing a few notes from the triad instead of always blurting out the whole thing. It's a great reference
one of the
point.
other things that's really helpful, I remember doing this whenever I was very first starting off and I didn't know what anything was as soon as I found a guitar part that had a shape I already knew, I didn't understand how it would fit together. So I remember the old, all that sort of stuff, or these things where you find triads in songs that you already know
like
and know the
Pinball
sound
Wizard
of.
or those
Yeah, oh
that,
yeah.
you know,
Well, the
that's-
other one that jumped out. Oh, don't you dare look back.
I'll take your eyes off me. So it's
You need a
like
bit of
your-
delay on
yeah,
it,
yeah.
but it's got that kind of thing where I started doing these things and going, oh yeah, that's a triad with a little sus move on it. Same
Yeah.
thing. It's basically the same idea as that. But you find these triad shapes in classic riffs or things. I mean, obviously all the Stonesy kind of things.
yeah.
Once you start being able to recognize those things, it helps connect your head together to go, oh yeah, I'm hearing a triad, you know,
Mm-hmm.
I'm playing a triad in that. Because some of the time I find we can learn the theory of the thing and apply it to the exact exercise we're doing and then go off and play our songs as if they're not the same thing. And
Yeah.
you should be hunting, you'll find triads in so much music, but it's being aware when you find one to go, oh yeah, that's what that is.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Learn to recognize them, but and again, that comes through practicing, through doing the boring part, the exercise, playing the triad, moving it up and down, getting used to the shape, used to finding the root note. Again, this a little bit comes back as well to knowing your root notes and knowing the notes on the strings, because guitar's one of those funny instruments where a lot of guitar players think they don't need to know the notes on their instrument, and it's. Can you imagine, like a trombone player, or a trumpet player, or a violin player,
Just
not
guessing.
knowing the notes on their instrument? Like, what do you mean? Like, you don't know the notes on the instrument? But loads of guitar players think it's okay because we got shapes and we can slide them up and down. It's a little bit easier to get away with it. But really, as soon as you want to start doing anything beyond the real basics, you need to get familiar with the notes on the fretboard. Those of you doing practical music theory, which I think is all of you, knows that there's a bunch of exercises. You maybe haven't got to them yet, but there's a whole series of different exercises to try and help you learn the notes on the fretboard. It's a really, really important thing, especially when we get into doing these, like the different triad shapes. If I just go to the close-up again, because we didn't talk about this before, but with the G triad, there's our root note there on the thinner string. But when we go to that second one, the root note's here on that string. So if you're trying to use this shape and you want to find a D chord, you need to know where can I put my third finger on the note D to be able to get that, to make that chord a D chord. So you note up there, or you shooting off camera. Most of you are familiar with open D. So learning those notes, the same with that position. There's the root note on the third string. So if you don't know your notes on the third string, you're never going to find a C chord or a D chord. So you really, getting to know the notes on the fretboard is a really key part of being able to use this stuff, I think. Any tips on getting to know the notes on the fretboard?
I mean,
Do you remember not knowing them?
Oh yeah. Dude, I remember the first time I realised that the pattern of notes repeated at the 12th fret of going like, oh my God. Because this was just all uncharted territory. I think what most people have is they start to build a sense of this area and then it's all kind of a bit scary and weird up here and you don't know beyond. What I used to do, and this was both reading practice and figuring out where the notes were practice, was I just used to take like, okay, if you go from E there to that A, and just a jumble of notes, like just write in random notes all over. I did it on a score, but you do it on a piece of paper. And then I would go through the process of going, okay, the first thing is I have to go through the score and write what each note is. That's an A, that's an F. And then I'd go and look for them. And it's really, like all these things, the initial part of it's really laborious. The big problem with it is people are always looking for a hack. Like, what's the fastest way? And there is no fast way. The more, it's kind of like going to the gym. I've built a robot that lifts the weights for me. It's the hack. You're going, no, the lifting of the weights is the bit that makes you better.
Yeah.
And for me, it was always, if I could approach a thing lots of different ways, even an exercise like find E in all the different places you can on the guitar neck. So, you know, even going from that simple open E, that's in the same register every time, but maybe going down octaves. All these little things would just cement into my head that whenever I needed to go for a certain thing. The other one was taking, I mean, the simplest thing ever, you guys will hopefully know the A minor pentatonic. I should take a scale and just play it. Then play it and say 1 flat 3 4 5 flat 7 octave A C D E G A, and sing in tune say the names of the scale degrees, and then say the names of the pitches. And just doing these sorts of exercises, you're attacking the same problem from different angles. So first thing, just technique. Second thing, scale degrees. Third thing, note names. And then finally, when it all comes together, what you ideally want in all of this is that you learn it so well that you don't think about it anymore.
Yeah.
It's only in that first stage of lumpy, weird, oh God, I don't know what, and then after a while, the same way we don't think about the words we use whenever we speak. I'm not thinking, oh, I better get a noun into this sentence. I just go, okay, what did you say? What's my thought? And then I verbalize that. So I find these exercises, people feel stupid. They never want to sing. They never want to sing the things that da 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 da. You're not doing it as a performance. You're doing it as a way of teaching yourself and really cementing this stuff in. And I can never persuade people. They'll either try it and see the result that it brings. Also, you do kind of learn how to sing by doing this. You get that byproduct of, oh God, suddenly I can sing in tune here. But I would say those two things, the random notes in the first 4 frets for me was a big thing. And then just taking something simple like a scale and just making it okay for yourself to try and sing along and say the notes out loud.
I think they're both great exercises. You mentioned the random notes, or finding all the different notes. One of the exercises I teach in the course that I shamelessly stole from the Joe Satriani Guitar Secrets book back in the late 90s, but is finding the same note on every string going up and down. So just starting on G and just being able to play G on each string all the way up, and then pick the next note, C. Because then you get this exercise of being able to move up and down, knowing where the notes are, because you find every one. As Dave just said, the notes just repeat after the 12th fret. So the rule is every note, no open strings. If there's an open string, you play at the 12th fret. That's a really great exercise to go through. And what the lesson that I teach on this, I suggest that you do it with a metronome, because using a metronome forces you to find the note a bit more quickly. Otherwise, you might go like G, G. Oh, where was that other G? And then, oh no, so having the metronome there kind of gives you a bit of pressure. You can't do it initially, so you do have to spend a little bit of time, first of all, without a metronome, just to learn where they are. But as soon as you're fairly consistent with it, I think a metronome at a slower rate than you can do it, but doing it consistently, I think is a really good, kind of induces panic in a way, putting the metronome on to make it a bit more real, to make you find
it's the throwing the dog in the river. He learned how to swim.
Yeah, exactly. Or the child. Yeah, exactly. It's a good.
I've done that one, yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, excuse me. Notes on the neck, triads, really good idea. We just talked mostly about using the thinnest 3 strings, but there's loads of great material that you can get out of the next set of strings as well. If you didn't realize the triad sets, there are triads, not the same 3. There are 3 triad shapes on each set of 3 strings. By far the easiest ones are the strings that are next to each other, but you can even split strings and have the triad spaced out over different strings. I don't recommend that you start off with that, but definitely strings 1, 2, and 3, and strings 2, 3, and 4, really, really, really useful. Just to give you an idea here, just staying with G for a minute. There's your first triad that we looked at with the root note on the thinner string. The next one uses 2 of those notes, but it gives us now the root note under the 3rd finger. Again, it's just part of this chord, it's the middle bit. That's a G triad. Then you've got this one, which is part of like a C-shaped chord, if you were looking for the full bar chord shape, with your 2nd finger on the root on the 2nd string. This is the next one down from that shape, then that shape. The 3rd one, very easy, it's just 3, same fret, and strings 2, 3, and 4, the middle string being the root note, the middle of that pattern of G string. So using those shapes, now you've got, when you're thinking of just the G chord, you've got G, 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 G. So just for the G chord, you've got 6 different ways of playing that one chord. So you can start to see why, if you've got a basic chord progression, this G, C, G, D progression, or G, C, D, C, or whatever you want, having a sort of repetitive chord progression like that is a great way of kind of getting under the hood of that and trying out all of these different triad shapes in a musical way, so you're actually putting them into practice. I think it's even a good idea to wedge them into songs that didn't have them in the first place and just try it. Like if you've got a mate that you can jam with that plays acoustic guitar, you just go, hey, let's play, I don't know, Wish You Were Here or what, and whatever song, jammy sort of a song, and just see if you can follow the chord shapes around. Now, I just noticed that I talked about Wish You Were Here, which has got minor chords in it as well. So far, all of the chords that we looked at were major chords, but the same idea applies as we talked about with triads. So root, third, and the fifth. If you want a minor triad, you just need to know which note is the third of the chord and flatten it. Now, rather than going through all of that right now, I'm going to give that to you some homework. If you've watched this video through and you've sussed out these 6 different major triad shapes, see if you can work out how to change each one of those into a minor triad. So in every one of those shapes, there's going to be one note that has to move backwards 1 fret. Okay, it's going to be a particular note, and especially if you're already familiar with, as most of you probably are, major and minor, you should be able to use that one shape to determine which is the note that is changing from major or minor, and then have a go at applying that to all of the other ones. Any other ideas on you, like the rhythm part of the triads? I can think of actually chips we should talk about as well.
Chips and splangs, yeah. It could be a good thing, a good exercise to do is to take a song has, for example, we did that GCGD, but it's all majors. Something like Wicked Game by Chris Isaak, which is a minor, another major, and a major. Okay. So you've got to find that B minor.
A.
Because it's not loads of minor chords. I mean, Wish You Were Here is tricky because there's so many chords. But again, finding these things where there's a loop of chords, something where there's maybe 3 or 4 chords going around, and you can really, again, because it's always going to be the transitions. It's the change from there, keeping those neat, or any of these things. You can move them into different positions and have fun with them. One other thing, and I mean, I don't know if this is going to derail things. It's just to let people know.
When you're using the Hexafloxadoxian scale...
No. Triads, whenever you get into them, we talk about them as a very simple building block of theory, but you can build immensely complex things. In fact, almost every stage of harmony that you go through, you can use triads to build all the weird chords. And I mean, the thing that jumps out at me, the example is that...
Going D to D minor.
I mean, that's an E flat over D, but it works because it's got a progression that we move through. And you could similarly have, I mean, these sorts of weird sounds or things that we associate with even that sound is an E major triad over G. And suddenly, but you get this G13 flat 9. It's this exotic sounding jazz chord, and you're like, well, if it came down to and I saw that in a chart, I would play. I'd just play the E above it, play the triad. So the thing is, and it's not like you have to absorb that sort of stuff yet, but it's to understand that whenever you go into triads, it's a basic building block, and it'll go with you all the way through your guitar journey. Like it's not a matter of just going, I've learned the shapes, triads done. You can keep coming back to these and find more and more ways of making amazing music with them, and it can be. I mean, even the weirdest. The thing, I can't play it on. You can't play it on one instrument, but in Stravinsky's Rite of Spring, there's a very famous chord in it, which was to have, I think it's an E flat chord with an E major triad above it, and he had this sort of. How close can I get? You can't really voice it on guitar properly, and it's the worst, most dissonant thing. It's just 2 triads, semitone apart. My brain exploded when I found that out. Even things like when somebody gives you an F sharp minor 7 chord and it sounds very exotic and stuff, and I would just play an A.
So that I was just about to touch on the one of the things that blew my mind when I was learning triads was when I started looking at 7th chords, and for the very first time I looked at a 7th chord and went, hang on, this is just a triad with a different bass note on it. Like they've put a bass note. So when you think of chords are always built in thirds and triads are built in thirds, every time you go up an extension to a 7th chord, a 9th chord, 11th chord, 13th chord, each little block up the chord is actually a triad. So they are
they're amazing.
incredibly useful tools like that. But again, if you're newish to guitar, then don't be looking for upper triad extensions of chords or triad substitutions or anything like that. You don't want to go there yet. But just be aware that there's a lot of room to grow within them harmonically, theoretically, practically. They really are a very useful little
I think
tool.
of them weirdly like primary colours. Because when there's nothing worse than if you're playing a pop song full of triads and there's like a jazz pianist on the gig and he keeps putting all of these
the wrong
extensions and inversions and you're like, no, this needs really bright, bold colours. So having that kind of sound is really bold in a way that is not that these are nice fancy chords and there's cool things happening in them, but they don't have this bold immediate primary color thing. So just like the way we teach kids what red, yellow and blue and green are before we teach them like mauve and you know, cyan and things like that, getting hold of these triads at the start, they give you a way to make really bold statements. You can be really like, it's not wishy-washy guitar playing. It's really like, boom, the chord is G. I'm going to play this G right now. So, and I've always loved that, just the ability to take that simple sound and go, as you said, chips, splangs, picked arpeggios, delay, anything like this. You can use triads on them and they all sound amazing. Like they do what they need to do.
Absolutely. So let's touch on chips. So chips are the same triad forms. So far, all of the triads that we've been played have been kind of arpeggiated, where I've been picking notes out of them. But you don't always have to play them like that. Playing them really short and sweet. Mostly it's going to be about this hand pressing down the chord as you play it and then relaxing it to get it nice and dead. You can mute with this part of your hand as well if you want it to keep it really super tight. But just having something on 2 and 4. Let's do Brown Eyed Girl, but I'll put chips on it instead.
No, let's do like Midnight Hour, E to A, so E,
okay,
A.
yeah. Just having this thing 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. So that kind of thing works. Like it's a really good rock and roll thing playing on 2 and 4. Of course, you've got the reggae thing as well, being able to use just those little triad chips on the offbeats or the 2 and the 4. I guess it depends on whether you think you
do C to D, G.
So, yeah, that kind of little chip thing, super effective. Probably lots of other styles as well, really.
Would you
Motown, soul,
use
all of those things.
country things again if you're playing, which kind of sounds like ska like this?
Yeah. Oh, okay. In that kind of context. Where are you going?
Yeah.
Lots and lots of different ways of use. And this is still a very simple 3-note chord. Learning those basic shapes on the thinner strings, you get loads of mileage out of you. It really is, I think, I've always been a big fan of learning a few simple things and trying to do them really well rather than learning lots of things and never be able to use them in the moment. So,
where would you not use triads? Like a blues tune, I don't think you would end up using these shapes because you need the sevenths in that sound.
Yeah. I don't tend to use triads in the blues.
No. And metal things are always like single note or maybe fifths or things like that.
Single notes like that the Pink Floydy thing or whatever. That a single line arpeggio maybe, but definitely not in the blues. I don't think.
No.
But I do use them to. Excuse me. I would use them to accentuate a chord change. So if there was just if I was playing on my own or there was just a basic bass part, I'd probably be using some triads to help outline the chord, but it would be more like I'd be thinking the seventh chord, the arpeggio of the seventh chord, but I might just end up using, if I play the blues and it goes to the 4.
U and A?
Yeah, but when it went to the D, I could...
Yeah.
And it's the triad, but I'm really thinking... Do you know
there's
what I
a
mean?
Stevie Ray Vaughan lick where he's playing...
Rude mood now.
So you got that...
Yeah.
Something like that. That's the same thing right again.
Exactly,
so you'll get triads that fit into those things. And again, you'll find even in, like, there's a lick, a friend of ours, Joan Wheatcroft, a wonderful gypsy jazz guitar, showed me. That's your triad in A. Take each one of them. And suddenly you've got that Django Reinhardt kind of thing going on. So again, it's that thing where triads keep showing up, but in certain styles you have to treat them away. Like when we're doing that blues thing, they're there, but they're in the middle of a lick. The jazz thing the same as well. I think you can get away with them. Yeah, any country and folk styles will be great. And that kind of like Simon and Garfunkel-y, a classic rock and classic singer-songwriter thing, you would have had that sort of stuff in it. Would things like AC/DC things they tend to use, it's more fifth-based chord shapes. Are there any things like that have...
They do use like first inversion chords. There's a little bit of that stuff where and second inversion where they deliberately leave out bass notes of stuff or play chords in a slightly different way. I'm thinking like Ride On and those kind of ballady things. But it's not triads in the same sense that we're talking about now with chips and thin as 3 strings. They're just different chord grips that happen to be triads. Because really, most of our open chords are triads, kind of, in that they're 3-note chords, but we're doubling notes so that... And I guess that's I'm not even sure I've got a definite answer on that. If you play a regular C chord on the guitar, you're only playing 3 notes. I generally wouldn't say it was a triad because I've doubled some, but actually it still is only 3 notes. So it kind of is a triad. I don't know. Is it a triad or not? What do you reckon?
I think it's more to do with how you voice a triad, but a triad means it only contains roots, thirds, and fifths. Whether you do them in octaves or do them in unison.
And doubling them doesn't make any...
Doubling them doesn't bother me at all. Because the thing is, you could play that with a G and a D and a B, but I've also put the B in there in open string, and you can get these lovely, quite unusual voicings for things.
I don't hear... My initial thought, it'd be a great chord grip, but I wouldn't think triad. Which is not, and this is the thing. I'm not disagreeing because I don't actually really know, but I always feel when I think of triads. If we were having a jam or doing a session, you said, "Man, chuck some triads down, triad chips on that." I'm going to be thinking little 3-note chords.
Chips,
that's the.
I suppose as a guitar player, it's the most practical way of playing them because we can voice them in a nice little tight chunk, and even with chips. The thing is with chips, sometimes people will ask for triads, and I'll just play 2 of the notes.
Yeah.
Dyads, if you like, but again, it's this thing where it's almost like we're going backwards from, we start off with these big spread out 6-string chords, and again, this was a thing I remember when I was younger, when I very first got hold of guitar magazines, and I would see all these weird like arpeggiated parts, and I'd be trying. That was the part, but I'd be trying to chase after them all, and you keep looking for all these, but then eventually once you realize, they're all based off the same things. I was just ignoring the chord diagram above. I didn't know what it meant. When you can connect them all together, you go from these big bulky 6-string shapes to these little 4-string, to maybe 3, to maybe 2 or root and fifth. And the main thing that's easy about the big 6-string shapes is there's only a few of them. And they basically move around in blocks. As soon as you go to a 4-string shape, you can move it around loads and you can do loads of stuff and find things. 3-string, even 2, So the fewer notes you have in the chord, you also have to make decisions about which three
one?
notes,
Yeah,
which
yeah.
two notes am I going to use. When you're using all six, it's just like, just G, mate. Job done.
Well, that is one of the, I guess, one of the big problems, one of the big hurdles. We already looked at that G one and said, well, just on the thinnest three, there's 2 sets of thinnest 3 strings in the next set. There were 6.
Yep.
And if you're playing a tune and it's changed chord, you need to change chord at that exact time to play on beat 1. What you don't want is analysis paralysis, where you suddenly start trying to think about what you're going to do and then you end up not playing anything because you can't decide which one to do. So I guess that comes back to that, like the thing I mentioned before about having a small amount of things that you can do well.
And you know they work every time.
That are it's the backup thing.
Yeah.
And then it doesn't mean that you can't try that other new thing, because you know that if it goes wrong or you don't quite make it, you can just jump back into the bit where you feel safe. And I think that that's a really important, especially if you're playing out. Like, it doesn't matter if you're just playing at home, experiment as much as you like, it doesn't really matter. But as soon as you're playing in front of other people or you're doing a gig or recording or whatever, there's definitely a sense of trying to get things right is a good idea.
Yeah, I see that with people whenever they're students and they feel unconfident, they feel unsure of themselves to go out and play a gig because they think they need to master all of it. And if you just learn a few set shapes and you can go out with, it's like, it's not, people sometimes think, oh, the audience is going to know I'm not very good. They haven't got a clue. They don't know. They don't know. It either sounds good or it doesn't. If you're playing the right shapes, it's going to sound good. They aren't waiting thinking, oh, is he going to do anything up at the 8th fret? Like, it's just not what people think.
God, this guitar player, he's used the same triad shape all night. Like, I never heard that.
Give
ever.
us an E shape.
Yeah.
It's just not like that. And if once you get these things under your hand, as you say, just 3 or 4 chord things, taking that one simple idea and playing it over, finding more songs that use that progression or that use those kinds of progression. A 1-4-5, a 1-6-4-5. There's about 1 million pop songs at the minute that all just use 1, 6, 4, and 5. And once you learn the triad shapes for those, you could literally go through all of them and just play them all, with or without you. That Shut Up and Dance.
It's the Access of Awesome.
Exactly. Yeah. Just go through that thing and just nail the triads, because that's all they're doing in that video. Yeah. They're just playing triads on the piano most of the time.
Exactly. Yeah. and strumming the chords. So.
Yep.
Yeah. So, somebody had said, I think that's why God invented the looper. So we've got a couple of questions. So let's, before we move on to looking at single-liney sort of things, let's have a quick look at the questions. If I can find my mouse on that other screen over there. Okay, Tino says, when playing triads on the top 3 strings, it's hard to properly voice lead the progression. Heard Mr. Dave playing something like Me and Julia Down by the Schoolyard in the beginning. Expert.
Paul Simon.
Yes, absolutely.
A master.
Yeah.
Oh.
It's hard to properly voice lead the progression. So voice leading is that thing that we were talking about trying to create a melody with the triads. You can think of voice leading as in deliberately trying to move to the nearest note of the next chord, but I think a better definition would be trying to create a melody, probably thinking about the top note of the triads that you're playing. Is that?
I mean, and if you think about what voice leading, where it comes from choirs, it's that if you have 3 people singing together, ooh, ah, ah, and they have to move to the next.
My pick. I've dropped my favourite pick on the floor. Oh, you can see it. The problem of having a brown pick on
a multicolored carpet.
Yeah, Indian carpet with lots of brown.
And you wanted them to go to C. If they'll go, it's a big jump.
Yeah.
But the note, that C is right next to you. That D stays the same.
Yeah.
So the voice leading thing is about each of the voices moves as little as they possibly can.
There's definitely a clue in the name.
Exactly. But it makes you connect your parts together in a way that's very smooth. If you think about it on a piano, they want to be able to play piano like that, not like this. Mm-hmm. It's much harder to kind of be looking up and doing things and coordinate both hands. So voice leading on triads, if you want to look at progressions, do this. You can do this away from the song. Just slowly go G to C. If you know the notes, G, B, D, and then C, E, G. They both contain a G. Mm-hmm. So make that your anchor point. And keep coming back to that thing again.
I want to move that down because it's
being obscured.
Your hand is exactly not in it. Can I? No, that's just all focused on me.
Well, you can
more
you can
me. Let's have some more of me. There we go.
So, so your G at the top on the 3rd fret of the E string is your anchor point, and you can go through lots and lots of different chords like this. So sometimes you want to go from G to D. What's the common note between the two of those? It's the note D. They both have D. Okay. So I play from my G shape here. But what I get is this lovely part at the top. And that it's just naturally satisfying. Again, if you hear, it's best illustrated in choirs because each choir member can only sing one note at a time. But when you hear them go, it's the most satisfying cadence in music. It's the best.
Absolutely.
So you can think about the perfect
cadence.
It's perfect. It doesn't get any better. Yeah. So you can think about your guitar playing like that. Or I could even play da 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 to give a rising effect so the whole thing goes up. Again, once you master these triad shapes, I think a certain amount of time should be just spent like noodling. Where you just sit with your guitar and you'd be like, how can I make a tune with this? What can I do with it? I think it was earlier when we were sitting warming up. Even that, something like Amazing Grace. Oh, wait, sorry. There's your triad. There's your triad. There's your triad. And you just do those sorts of things to find, okay, suddenly there's a melody contained in all of this sort of stuff. And you can kind of, because I know we're about to move on to the melody thing, you end up making your rhythm guitar parts much more intentional because you're thinking, I want this to go up here, I want this to sort of sing out. Also, the thing of, I want to stay out of the other person's way. If they're already playing up here, you want to be able to make choices that keep the two of you distinct.
Yep.
So that you can go for other ideas, but still blend.
Not in the same zone. I guess the exception to that would be like Rolling Stonesy things where they deliberately play almost the same thing, but not quite in a weavy way. But that's a whole.
If you're in the Rolling Stones, you play whatever you want.
Exactly.
I'm not telling you. This video is not for you.
Yeah.
But
Keith, why are you playing the same? Yeah. You should be playing a
Tune your
triad
guitar
shape
properly.
up there.
Come on, 6 strings.
And put the extra string on. So let's just touch on the single string thing a bit. And I think that using triads in a single note soloing kind of a sense isn't something that I do a lot or did a lot. There are ways of doing it for sure, but it's not something that I found as easy to get into as using them in the rhythm sense as the way that we've been looking at. For me, the single line use of triads came more from arpeggio. So I tended to think more in terms of 4-note arpeggios personally, dominant 7th arpeggios in the blues and other 4-note arpeggios for jazz. But as Dave's just been doing, there are some definite examples. Sultans of Swing is using the...
Those are two triads?
Yeah, kind of. Yeah,
no, they totally are.
No,
that's a B
absolutely.
major.
Yeah, okay.
And an E minor, that's what they are.
No, that's true. So, yeah.
But it's finding those cheeky ways to play the triads where they don't feel like a formulaic thing. They feel like something fun and cool and kind of, that have a shape to them. And that one...
Okay, yeah, of course. That is triads.
That's one of the big ones.
Or the Sultans of Swing.
Yeah.
That is also...
Which I actually don't know that, like.
What key
Keys
are we in?
it, D minor?
Yeah. There we go.
Yeah,
so they are triads, but they don't look the same then, all of those things. So as opposed to the triad shapes that we've been looking at, many of these ones have 2 notes on the same string when we start to get into the licks, like the ones from Hotel California. Yep. You have 2 notes on one string and 1 note on an adjacent string. So the shapes are a little different. And I think one of the mistakes that I made was trying to use these shapes in solos, like I'd be playing a G blues and trying to go... It never worked for me. Like I couldn't find a way of wedging that in. So I was like, well, triads, they're not going to work. And I gave up on them. And then as I got more into using arpeggios, they seemed to blend with the chords in a better way and mix in with blues. And they just sounded more musical to me than the triad shapes. But Dave's already shown a couple of examples where it's like they're obviously triads. But they're kind of...
There's one, it's like a secret fast lick. The old... You can, if you're playing rock guitar, that is easier to make fast. Like it sounds flashier than it is difficult.
Yes,
is what I mean essentially. Or
okay,
you've got all those kind of classical.
Do you want to just show that one just slowly so that they can, because that's likely to be. You're playing an A minor triad, right? So that's the
notes.
A.
There's the root, flat third, fifth, and I'm playing. So it's a pull off, and then when I get faster, I'm just doing a trill. So I'm only picking that first note and the second note, then I pull off.
Have a little pick off, yeah.
Or you can do it.
So that's a minor triad. Can you show the major triad? So just move the... Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So that form is a really nice starting point for having a major and a minor triad that you can use on as a kind of a lead line. There was the other one, the Pink Floyd one that we talked about, that from Comfortably Numb.
So that one is where, if I'm taking a shape, let's say like this kind of D majory shape.
I love the look of that guitar.
It's
I'm just like, the fact that it's all matte and not all glary is like, yeah, love it.
Good on camera,
sorry.
So the key thing we're trying to get here is this shape, which is just the notes of D major triad. And then it's how you connect them together. So in there I'm doing a pull off, a slide, another slide, slide and a pull off. And again, for me it's just about, once I know where the notes are, I can connect together loads of different ways, but it's just using this one triad arpeggio idea. Little B in there as well. And you can use this all over the neck. It could be down here. Oh, I went too far down there.
The focus is pulling weirdly on.
But you can find all these sorts of different licks, and they're all built around
a triad,
just third, root, fifth, third, root, fifth, third. Resolve them back again.
Do you find that you use them very much in a lead guitar sense on guitar?
Yeah.
You're using triads all the time?
Not all the time, but I love, there's ideas like that. Like if I was playing a solo and I always find the hardest thing in solos is ending them, knowing how to end them. And sometimes you're going to want to go up and up and up and up and do the big bend, do the thing. But if I'm thinking I want to get back down, especially if I do it on bass even more so, but that's... kind of gets you out in a lick there to finish off the whole thing. That kind of, I tend to use those triad arpeggios to cover distance. If I want to go to a different part of the neck, they're a lovely way of. And then if you, as I say, put slides or hammer-ons in between them, it means you're using the same. Musically, it feels very like correct. It makes very good sense when you hear it. It's like, it's why David Gilmour feels very satisfying when he plays those sorts of things. You go,
it's like
a choice.
Is it not? And this is, here we're getting back into that murky territory. The idea of playing chord tones versus the idea of playing a triad. So this is where it gets. So I will very often play chord tones.
Yeah.
But if the chords are basic major and minor chords, they're triads. So therefore, if I'm targeting chord tones, it's kind of triads. But most of the time, I'm not thinking about the triad a triad shape.
Yeah.
Again, when we go back to that idea, like if I said to you, play triads on the thin of strings, we're into these little grips. I don't think of it like triads. I just think of like trying to highlight chord tones, but almost certainly I'm going to be playing around with them, like the encapsulating them or using like that little jazz trick. There are other things around it, or the sus4 trick in the Gilmour thing. So I kind of feel like they're targeting chord tones rather than triads, even though you would end up playing triads, but I think of it a different way. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
The same, you use this as a triad thing. It's kind of, but for me that's kind of major pentatonic, or I don't know, like.
But I think the thing
it's
is,
it's
if
a
you
lick
can
that
see
highlights the
that
chord
the
tones.
triad is within that lick, then it means you're not just suddenly playing a giant bunch of notes. Because I found this when I first started learning. I was always thinking one word at a time. But now I'm thinking sentence. Because I'm not having to think about the individual ingredients. I'm thinking a G triad sound. And I'll even do it where I'll do things like splitting
So
it.
would you think, I'm just going to interrupt because I think this is the crux. You just said, I'm thinking a G triad sound. So I wouldn't think G triad, I'd just think G.
Or G, yes. But a G major, like G major with no other, like no seventh, no flat nine, none of these things. Because if I was to play, you know that's not the triad sound. If I play.
But do you not feel that's the same if you go? Because you're adding
You're adding but that's the thing, you're adding a little bit of
sixth or
extra
whatever,
something in. Yeah. And so if you've got that, because you can do the okay, if I was to play, or then we end up getting, and by being aware of it, you get more flavour. So I'm starting out from very basic, almost like a classical.
Yeah. Well, I think your colour analogy is interesting because you think if triads are the primary colours.
Yeah, and then I'm adding in a little bit of extra flavour. So if I add that, then I'm getting a little bit more country. And if I go, and I've got the flat third on the major, then we're going bluegrass. But behind all this, I can see and it provides a framework. And then, because people often I find whenever you're teaching guitar and you show them the basic lick, they then hear the fancy lick and just have no idea how to get from here to there. And a lot of the time, if you can see your triad as like a scaffolding and you connect together in interesting ways, because you could play G, B, D, G, B. Now you've got Lydia's. Now you've got a chromatic thing. Now you've got a more jazzy, gypsy-ish thing, but it's still do, do, da. That's the crux of what I'm going for. So that's where I would use triads like that. And then again, for that more jazzy thing where I can be aware of, if you're just thinking about shapes, where I know taking things like moving triads up in minor thirds, or playing the wrong triad over, somebody plays a D and I play that B triad because I know that it works. I'll use triads and soloing like that. But it all still comes, like it's still that same shape. It's just the context of it has changed a little bit. And again, if we think of that triad journey a person goes on, we start from playing splangs and chips, basic jamming with that chordal approach. We begin to integrate it into melody like this. And it can just be a little, or even that, like that. That first thing he plays is, it's a little rake on a D major triad. It's that familiar shape that we all use so many times. So I think whenever you'll rarely find someone who builds a solo just with triads, but you can, against this thing I said earlier about looking for triads where they're being used, you'll suddenly see someone do this and go, because we talked about this earlier.
Love that tune.
Glamour Boys by Living Colour. When I heard it, I was like,
Boys, is it?
Sorry?
It's not called Glamour Boys. It's called Solace of You.
Glamour Boys.
I got the solace of you.
It is. Sorry, I'm thinking of Living Colour. So many good tunes.
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, Solace of You coming in. When I heard that, it has that African high life guitar.
Absolutely.
I was like, what's that made of? It's all made of major triads.
Absolutely.
They just move them around in interesting ways.
Yeah. I think that on the lead front, it's just a perspective thing, and I don't think that it's either right or wrong. It's just a different.
Hang on. One of my favorite guitar solos.
Yeah, true. Okay.
That's, I mean, that theme from Brian May, and he uses it in Kind of Magic. Whatever the rest of the lick is.
And in Crazy Little Thing Called Love, and lots of it. Yeah.
We're unlocking the
Yeah,
Triads.
absolutely. So, I mean, they appear, I guess that I just think of it in a lead guitar sense. I don't think of the triads, I think of the chord.
Yeah.
Even though I would end up playing triads, and again, this is just a perspective. If you're thinking, looking for the triad, I would definitely be finding more of them than if I'm just looking at chord tones.
Yeah.
But again, after chatting with Jake the other day, incredible guitar player, but it's still one of the interesting things we were talking about was how valid music can be with or without complexity, and that just because something's complicated doesn't necessarily make it better. It's a really interesting thing. So some of it I feel like is about our decisions on the way we look at things is about our personality and what we enjoy doing, and how much study we want to do is a reflection again of our personality. You're either studious or you're not, or you've got time or you don't, and all of those things will reflect on the way that you play or how you approach those sort of things.
Sometimes the simplest, Beethoven's Fifth, da 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 da, is not very complicated. Is it better Charlie Parker, or is it da 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 da? Like, I explained this when I was teaching some composition stuff and talking to friends about this. Think of it that you have a scale that goes from power to detail. And you can choose where you want to go on that spectrum of stuff, because if you look at someone playing, it's got lots of power, but it's not super detailed. There's not lots of chords and harmony and kind of stuff. And then when you find a really, twinkly, sparkly thing that an orchestra's playing, it's probably not going to be that powerful if it's got loads of different simple, powerful. And if you always just think of that slider, you can put it right in the middle, powerful and detailed, but it's going to be half of each, all the way to power, all the way to detail. I tend to make choices these days thinking like, what does this thing need? Does it need more power? Because AC/DC is power. It's not super detailed. But
there's nuance.
There's nuance, but there's not detail. They're not going like. I'm trying to think of a riff you could even mess with in AC/DC that would work. It's not. Like, you can't even. It instantly doesn't sound like that. That's power. Even that, like, and buff. He's not even playing the hits. Like when you get to those things and then you look at a Dream Theater song or something by Periphery, which is much more detailed.
Yes.
Doesn't have the same kind of immediate visceral power thing.
No.
So that thing, whenever you're coming up with your ideas, like you're saying, talking to Jake about complexity is good if you want complexity.
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
And if you want something that's really like immediate and just powerful and strikes you, complexity can kind of be annoying. It feels like somebody's word salad talking around something when you just need a clear idea. And in those moments, again, primary colors, triads, we'll come back to these things. I think whenever we start off, or at any stage in our guitar journey, we feel the need to prove to all the other guitar players around us all the stuff that we've learned and all the things that we know, when sometimes it's just... And that's amazing.
And most people don't know whether stuff is complicated or not. People could listen to Alan Holdsworth, one of those chord things, and just think, oh, it's nice, but not realise that you have to break all your fingers to be able to play it.
No idea. And then they'll hear Noel Gallagher take a solo on an Oasis tune and go, dude, this kills! And you're like, I mean, it's
does,
what you're into, but...
Okay.
So stop trying, just play G.
I've just noticed it's 10 past, so we've massively overrun. And it's kind of getting late here, and we've got a full day in the studio tomorrow, and I've got school run and all of that stuff soon. So I think we're going to have to leave it there. Sorry if we didn't get to your questions, although the questions seem to have disappeared, so maybe Fanny's taking them off. I'm hoping we'll get Dave back for some more of this. We're definitely planning on doing some more writing and recording and creative stuff, so whenever he's down, I'll see if I can't rope him into coming in to do this. And I was just thinking halfway through that this would make a really interesting podcast, even without the visuals. Me and you arguing about
it's not a triad. It is.
No,
Look,
it's
he
a
has
chord
a sword.
It's a chord
He's a gangland enforcer. Yeah,
okay,
exactly.
we could get swords involved. Yeah, definitely. Hope you found this session super helpful. Big thanks, Dave. Really awesome to have you on. And thanks, Fan, for organising everything again. Thank you for joining us. I really hope you're enjoying all of the theory stuff over on the site at the moment. And yeah, we'll be back for more of these very soon. Have yourself a fantastic weekend ahead, or week and weekend, of course. Take care. Bye-bye. See ya. End stream. Bye-bye.